Namaste. How are you? Good to see you. Actually, I'm not seeing you, so good to be together. So let's take a little moment to get us back into that heart sourcing space. And then we have a number of questions that people emailed in today. Some interesting stuff, I hope. So let's just chill. Let's just become present. Notice your breath. And notice that place in the heart, deep in the very middle of the chest. And just let yourself drop into the heart. Who cares what just aggravated you 15 minutes ago? Or even what stressful thought runs through your head right now, or what tension may still linger in your body. Your heart is waiting. It's always waiting, but now together we can maybe notice it a little bit more. So let's just drop into the heart. And what that means is to be present, but there's a whole additional dimension to it. Present is awareness. To be present, we're aware of being present. But now you let yourself fall into the body, and in the body into the heart. Into the very core of the peace and the bliss of your being. Now, bliss is kind of a funny word because many of us don't really know what the heck it is, because it's at the same time extremely subtle and extremely powerful. I remember one time many years ago when I was with my teacher and I was not aware of what I was feeling. We were actually driving in a car. And I was quiet, but I was not realizing what I realized after she said what she said. And she said to me, "Oh, Ramgiri, you're in bliss." And I had to be told that in order to reflect on what I was actually feeling, because it can be missed, even though it was pretty strong at the time. I still remember it today. So that blissful feeling, it's so much who we really are in the very core of our being, but miss most of the time. And it comes from stillness and from just being open to loving the moment. So I invite you to that blissful place of the heart, which is always there. And you can very simply approach this by bypassing in a very good way. Now, bypassing can be a bad thing when it's used in a different way, but this is a good way. Bypassing all the emotional stuff that may still be floating around, all the stressful thought, just bypassing them, going straight into the heart. And it helps because we're doing this in a group. We're doing this people all around the world right now. And even when you tune into this later on, like you watch it on YouTube, it's still the same thing because love is not limited by time or space. So whenever you're doing this, whenever you're watching this, you get the benefit of a whole bunch of people doing this together. And love is a wonderful thing because it grows as we share it. So again, just relax into the heart, into the very core of your being. And see if you can find the sensitivity to be aware of the sensation that emerges from the heart. And we often talk about the heart like a sun that emits light and warmth and kindness and comfort and a very solid sense of security. There's no way you can get hurt by feeling that sensation of the heart. And as we drop into the heart, to become still is, of course, of the essence, because in stillness, we can feel it more and more deeply. So I'm going to stop talking for a moment and invite you just to bring all your inner senses, your inner seeing, your inner feeling, your inner hearing, your inner listening, your inner tasting, your inner smelling even, into that place of the heart. See what you find. And sometimes it's a little bit more difficult to just go into the heart and try to feel it's there because that's only one point, the heart itself. So depending on what kind of a day you're having or how much you've practiced this direct access to the heart, it can be a strong feeling or it can be very subtle, too subtle to really make it out. So let me help you by creating two places. So when we stretch something out into, we have two poles, then there's a greater way of feeling it. So now let's take the heart itself and you picture that like a sun, warmth, light, kindness, happiness, love, emitting sun. And then you receive that warmth in your physical body, in your emotional body, in your mental body. And it's that receiving, that opening up, that letting it come in, letting it be felt, that makes it really tangible. So we now have that inner place of the heart, and we have your whole body as a receiver. So let's try that for a moment. So receiving is something that some of us have a little trouble with. But there's a great image of that. So let's say it's like the first warm spring day and you're going to the beach and you're just plastering yourself into the sun. And the first time after a cold winter, the rays of the sun just feel so good and you just let them soak in right down into the marrow of your bones. So that's real receiving. So let's see if you can receive that inner glow from the heart like that. And if this is all still strange, if you're new to this, don't worry about it. It'll grow on you step by step. Just give it a try. And if you've done this for a little while, just have a great time. So the heart shines like the sun, and that great warmth, that great kindness of the heart, this unconditional love is being received in every cell of your body. Feel the body respond to that. Feel it soften. Feel yourself getting that inner glow. And know that you can come back to this at any time. The heart doesn't go anywhere. That inner source is always available, except when we're stuck in stressful thoughts or negative emotions or some kind of ego emanation or other. And yet, that pristine peace and love of the heart is always there, just waiting for us to notice. So even though I'm talking now, feel how that still feels in your body. It doesn't go away. Your mind can be busy with stuff. But when your being is still absorbing, your being is still permeable to that great love inside of you, then what happens, it becomes increasingly a solid reality inside of you. It's like you're no longer getting lost in the head or getting overwhelmed by emotions. They can still take place. And you have increasingly this solid feeling that you are anchored and rooted in the heart. And you can try that during your day-to-day life. Just remember the heart, and remember if you're getting this right now, what it feels right now, to have the heart radiate its love, its warmth into the body, and the body receive it. And there's this feedback loop, and the body receives it, then more love can stream out from the heart. And it just grows and becomes solid and wonderful and tangible. And then you will find that it's the most natural thing for you to just be friendly, to be open, to be present with people. And it's not personal, it's not exclusive. You don't like this one and you don't love that one. You're just open. You're just kind of this sending device of a certain vibrational quality that is delicious and that you know you love, and it stands to reason that other people love that too, if they can be open to it. And, people have their different sensitivities at different times to that. Some people may be open sometimes, some people may be never open to it. That's okay. Because you don't need to be acknowledged by them. You don't need to be loved back by them. You don't need to be appreciated by them. All of this is already in you. We have a way of loving in our culture that always seeks to get something back. It's very conditional. I love you if you do this for me. And we're just going to leave that behind by finding the eternal source of love inside of us and going deeper and deeper into it, filling ourselves and filling through that our world. And there are going to be people who respond to that, who come close with it, maybe just for a moment, maybe for a longer time. And others, it won't work for them. And that's okay. We don't need anything from them. We have the source of love, but that love loves to love. Because when we share love, it grows in us. So there's never a sense of scarcity. There's never a sense of, what's in it for me? Because you're already fulfilled. You already have what you're looking for, what you could possibly want from someone else. So let's do this one more time, all of us, wherever you are in this world right now, together, just let's feel this sharing of our love. Let's feel our hearts. And you really just feel your heart. But when several hearts sort of vibrate together at the same time, it's just so much more easy to feel and so much fuller and So I don't know if you could hear that just now, but as we were just quiet, there was a phone ringing close by. And, we all have this old tendency that the mind says, oh, this is annoying, I want some peace or something. But when you're in your heart, it's just, what do you do with a thought like this? It's just so unbelievable that anything would be upsetting. Why would we be bothered with upsetting ourselves about anything when we can have this fullness of the heart instead? And the image that comes to me is of sailing. It's like you open your sail to this wind of grace from the heart, and the sail is your whole being. You open your whole being to this like a solar wind from the heart. And it just floats you through the events of your life in a most gentle and wonderful way. Okay, now keep this feeling. You don't have to lose it. We're going to answer some questions, but just stay in this. You're still sailing. You're still receiving that solar wind, so to speak, from the heart. It doesn't stop. You can even deal with very unpleasant things. Some things are unpleasant, and still be enriched by that inner nurturing essence from the heart. So let me take a look at some of the questions. So one question was how addictions work, or how we do work with addictions through this perspective of heart sourcing, and how addictions relate to the reality of divine love. So when we talk about addictions, I have to go back to the very beginning. And the very beginning is the fact that we have in the mind a function which in Vedanta is called ahamkara. We usually translate it as ego, but that's not very precise. Ahamkara means it's the I-making facility of the mind. So in other words, the mind takes everything it thinks of or it perceives and relates it to this concept of an I. You know, I'm going here, and that means I am the person who's walking here. These people talk to me that way, and that means that about me, and so on. It's just a subtle, constant process that goes on in the mind. So we create this sense of I, which is our false identity, constantly anew. So that sense of being a separate entity, separate from the great flow of life, separate from God, separate from the heart, that is our primary addiction, and we all have it unless we're an enlightened being. Now, even enlightened beings still function from something that appears like an I. In other words, they have to have that in order to maintain their body and their presence in the world, but they no longer believe it. So they're free of it. Now, the rest of us, we have this basic addiction. And so anyone listening to this, you may not have an active addiction, but you can relate to it because we all suffer from this prime addiction to seeing ourselves as a separate entity. Now, when we are a separate entity, what that means is that there's a quality of distractedness in the mind. The mind always jumps around from one thing to another, one thought to the next thought, one idea to the next idea. So this distractedness is going on inside of us. Now, what does this distractedness mean? We're distracted from what? Ultimately, we see the mind jumping around, but it is a distractedness to our true being, to our true self, our divine self, our enlightened self. We don't recognize that, and so Instead, we're focusing on all kinds of different things, usually external stuff. And we stay estranged from us. And that creates, there's an underlying pain that is in that. That is inevitable. We may not be aware of it specifically as a pain, but it is present in all of us. It's just this pain of not being at home with yourself in your true being. And some beings are quite sensitive to that. Others, it doesn't bother them so much. Now, that part in a person who's sensitive to that pain, and that pain may, of course, be strengthened or made much worse by negative life experiences, by abuse or neglect, etc., usually in childhood. Then we discover a way that appears like a fix. We discover some kind of substance or a behavior that allows us for a little while not to feel this pain. And that's like a great revelation. Now, this process can be pretty much under the radar also. It can be that you're not even aware that there's a pain because maybe that's all you've ever known. So it's pretty normal for you. And yet when you're finding, let's say, a substance or a behavior that allows you for a moment to switch off that pain, you tend to go back to it again and again. So now we're creating not just an addiction to ego, but an addictive behavior. And the addictive behavior then takes over and becomes its own dynamic. And I don't have to go into detail of how destructive or self-destructive this can be. Now, in my experience in working in addictions, I have done that for a long time. The part of us that becomes addicted is really the part of us that is most sensitive, that is often the most spiritual, a very, very precious part of the person. It's more the right side of the brain, the creative side. And that discovers the substance, and it's like it sees the substance or the behavior like a life preserver. And then, of course, it becomes a disaster. It can become a nightmare. But even more subtle addictions, like watching 3 or 4 hours of TV a day, or overworking, working 80, 90 hours a week, even though it's not made from a sense of great joy and great creativity, but from a sense of neurosis. Or the kind of ways that people get into chronic conflicts in relationships. Where we live here, there's a woman in the neighboring farm, and we hear her often in the morning go on these long tirades, and we don't understand because she's speaking Hindi. We don't understand, but we can hear the tone of voice. It's a very unhappy, aggressive, complaining tone of voice. And that's just one example. We all have our ways when we have an ongoing problem with someone or something. That's also an addictive habit. Now, how can that take us out of some old pain? Well, it gives us this sense of, I've been wronged, I've been mistreated, I have to get even, I have to show them, I have to fix that. So again, so you see the I involvement, the involvement of the ego. And then there's another related kind of addiction. That's the pain body addiction, which is actually an addiction to pain itself. And again, what does that do? It gives us the sense that we are who we have felt ourselves to be for most of our lives. There's this familiar sense maybe of depression or anxiety or worry. And we tend to go back to that and feel it again and again. So we don't have to change, we can stay the same. Why do we do that? Because that saves us from the greater fear we have, the fear of change, which means the fear of the unknown. Because if I change, then I have to go into the unknown. So these are all the different ways of addiction. Now, how do we deal with that? In heart sourcing. In heart sourcing, we have several primary skills that we use. The first one is to go into the heart, like we just did earlier. And when you can do that and do it successively, like day after day, both as a formal practice and on the spur of the moment, just come into the heart when you have a moment you remember. That's powerful nurturing from inside, but often we can't get there because there are stressful thoughts. There are negative emotions, and there are behaviors that don't work for us. So some people say you have to stop the behavior, like let's say if you're addicted to a substance, you have to stop the behavior before you can do anything else. That's not my experience. You can start working with your mind right away with your thoughts. You can find the places, this is the technique for that, or the skill for that is the work of Byron Katie. Because it's not your body that drinks, it's the mind that makes the decision to drink or to use the drug or to sit in front of the TV for yet another several hours. So you can work immediately on clearing these cobwebs in the mind that keep us going in the same direction. You can clear the emotional body, which tends to drive the same old behaviors through open attention. And both of those clear the mind, clear your capacity to come deeper into the heart and to nurture yourself and to love yourself despite everything. Why would you love yourself? For no reason. Because you have that heart, you have the source of love in you. That's all the reason you need, to feel that source, to drink from that well, to nurture yourself, to love yourself. And when you bring the mind into peace and into clarity, and the emotions into harmony, and you nurture yourself from that inner source, then you become more still. And in that stillness, this tendency of creating a separate I, an I that has to suffer out of habit, gets removed. It's like a veil that opens up when you're ready. And with that, an even deeper layer, a level of love, a truly divine love becomes available to you. And this is ultimately what we're all hungry for. And you have the choice to get yourself addicted to that. Get yourself addicted to that essence of your heart. That is the addiction to end all addictions. So if you already have an addiction, well, you're already a specialist. Just switch your substance, switch your behavior, drink that essence of the heart, receive it in the totality of your body. Let it clear you. Let it show you that you are made of love. I hope That's helpful. Now, let's look at the next question. There was a question about jnana yoga. So, jnana yoga is the yoga of wisdom. And we have contrasted that in the past with the yoga of love and the heart and the yoga of wisdom. And they're both very powerful ways, very powerful primary yogas. And they're quite different. And there are people who tend to be more intellectual. They tend to gravitate toward jnana. And people who tend to be more emotional, feeling people, they tend to gravitate more toward bhakti or devotional yoga. The question is, what is jnana? What's the deal with that, right? So there are two ways to experience reality, or to experience, let's say, the supreme, the ultimate. And one is without form. So what does that mean? To understand that there is a supreme reality. That's something in the mind at first. And so we remove the layers of what we usually identify with. You see, who am I? This is one of the primary questions of Jnana Yoga. Who am I? You ask that question. And then at first, all kinds of ideas come up. I'm this person, I'm male or female, I was born then, I had these parents, and so on and so forth. And when we look deeply at all of them, we see that they're all not true, because they're all just there for a little while and they're gone. So if something is that temporary, it can't be who we are, because there's something inside of us that yearns for permanence. Why? Because permanence is what we are in essence. Something timeless. A timeless being, a timeless presence. And there's naturally in us a desire to experience that. And in Jnana Yoga, you go about it in this more philosophical way, but philosophical is not the right word. It's a yoga of inquiry. Who am I? So you peel away the layers of identifications with this and that and this and that, and you get more and more and more clear. And eventually, there's no more answers. There's no more ways you identify with something that you can look at and find out you're not it. So what is left when we no longer identify with something, whether it's pleasant or unpleasant? What's left is absolute peace. What's left is a direct experience of our true identity, which is so transcendent that we can't really put it into words. Concepts aren't made for the absolute. And that is contrasted with another way that is more concerned with form. In traditional yoga, it is the devotion to a form of God. And that form of God can be a specific one. Here in Hinduism, it's very interesting because you got thousands of different forms of gods and goddesses that you can pick from, or enlightened gurus who can do the same thing for you. But it's interesting because I was raised Catholic, so it's actually very similar, but don't tell any Catholics because they won't believe you. But in Catholicism, you also have God the Father, you have Mary, you have Jesus, you have the Holy Spirit, you have a whole pantheon of saints. You can relate to them. And we get through that relationship with that being, that same essence.
Lindell says, does that mean that Byron Katie teaches Jnana Yoga? Repeat the question.
The question, additional question was, does that mean that Byron Katie teaches Jnana Yoga? I don't want to tell what Byron Katie teaches, that's for her to say, but it's certainly related. It's a specific addition to working with the mind, to Jnana Yoga, I would say. A particular meditation or meditative skill that allows us to clear the mind and by doing that, looking at each stressful thought to discover that that thought isn't true. So what does that do? I'm involved in saying, John wronged me. Stressful thought, right? Now, you know what comes with all of that, this whole warfare I have with John, whether it's just in my head or with him out there. And when I find out that that is not even true, and I won't walk you now through the process of that, but I want to make you curious if you don't know that yet. If I find out that that is not even true, then that whole war I have with George just falls away, and I'm free. And so by examining these stressful thoughts, I release myself out of wrong identification, just like we said before, into a non-dual state, a state beyond conflict, beyond this always struggling way of life. So yes, I don't want to put words into Byron Katie's mouth, but I would think that what she teaches is an aspect or a particular approach to Jnana Yoga. Now, if this is difficult for you to wrap yourself around Jnana Yoga, I can totally relate. Because it took me just about 30 years of spiritual practice before I could really deal with Jnana Yoga, because I'm a feely, touchy kind of guy. And so working with the heart, with devotion, that just came very natural to me. But the interesting thing is that when you're just having bhakti, when you're just having this devotional yoga, and you don't have the understanding, the realization that comes through wisdom, then your bhakti also remains a little shaky, I think. That's my experience at least. On the other hand, if you're just going for wisdom and for this sort of more mental inquiry, although it does transcend the mind eventually, and you don't have love, then you're dry and brittle, and it's not a safe way to go. So the wisdom and the love, they need each other. They fulfill each other. They work with each other. So, long answer about a simple question. I hope I made some sense to you. And then I have another question. And it's 3 parts. From Janice. Who do we become when things don't go our way? And when you don't get what you want, how do you react? And what happens when you allow everything to be as it is? So the wording of these questions. So the first one is pretty clear. Who do we become when things don't go our way? Well, Janice, you got to answer that for yourself. Who do you become when things don't go your way? We all have our peculiar answers to that. We become raving lunatics. We become uptight. We have all kinds of thoughts that life isn't fair, isn't good, isn't treating us well, that we are not getting what we need to get, and all of that stuff. And all of this just creates more and more misery. The principles here are that we fall into the traps of desire and aversion. These are the two primary tendencies that are the downfall of human beings. If you're in a place of peace, you don't need anything, you don't desire anything, and you're not aversive to anything. But frankly, most of the time we're not there. So why is that? Because we want something that is not present at this moment, or we reject something that is present at this moment. So that's our work. To look at these desires, these ways that we're not loving what is, as Katie would say, the way we're always struggling in some way. And then we have this belief that, well, if I don't have these desires, then nothing is ever going to get better. Not true at all. If you live in a peaceful state, the energy to change something when something needs to be changed will naturally arise. You don't have to have desire for that. If you're crossing the street and a car comes down at you, you don't have to have a desire to run away, to jump out of the way. You'll just naturally do that. So in the flow of life, we don't need desire, we don't need aversion. And I invite you, if that sounds strange to you, I invite you to really look at that closely. Because whatever we need for life arises out of a state of being centered, out of a state of, as I would say, living out of the open heart. So now, the next question, I wondered a little bit about your wording here. When you don't get what you want, how do you react? So are you talking about you? Often people say you, but they mean me. But then I can't answer that. So let me assume that you're talking about me. So the question is, how do I react when I don't get what I want? How do I react? Well, I may get pissed off. But you see, I've spent a little time working on my desire nature and my aversive nature. So they're no longer grabbing me. They still arise, or let's say the semblance of them still arises, but I look at it with amusement. Like if I don't get what I want, I may be grumpy. I may be complaining. And I watch that, interested from deep inside of me, from that place of the heart that's become increasingly solid, and say, isn't that far out? And it's almost like I can speak of myself in the third person. Look at him complain. Look at him being grumpy. Look at him getting angry. It's fun to live that way when you can allow life and the natural energies of life to occur, but they don't overwhelm you. In other words, anger may arise, but you're not angry. You're the one watching in there with amusement, looking at this manifestation of anger. Huh, isn't that cool? And there is underneath that the presence of love that is increasingly unshakable. It's like you're loving yourself being grumpy. You're loving a desire to arise and not being fulfilled. because you know that that also is excellent. That also is the best way it can be. As we say, nothing happens to you, everything happens for you. So if I don't get what I want, I know that it's better for me not to get what I want. That's not intellectual knowing. That has to be like in your being for that to be real. So if I don't get what I want, what I may get or what I may want is that moment of being grumpy. And then that passes. And life goes on naturally, without pretense, without shutting myself down. Oh, I can't get what I want, so now I can't be angry because I'm a spiritual guy. What a bummer. You can just let yourself be the way you are. And you enjoy every moment. But in order for you to get there, there has to be a process of purification. These tendencies for desire and aversion have to be purified. Because when they get you, when you really identify with that stuff, when you're still in that understanding that you could possibly be missing something in life, then you're still in trouble. Then these two little monsters of desire and aversion, they run you. And that's a very unhappy way of life. So let me look at the last question here. What happens when you allow everything to be as it is? Well, I just explained that. You live a normal life as a perfectly normal appearing person, but you're no longer identified with either the thoughts or the emotions or the behaviors that arise. They're purified of that grasping that the ego is, oh yes, I'm angry now, I'm going to get even. Well, that is hell. That is hell, and only you create your hell. No one else does. It's not the circumstances that create your hell, but the way you react to them. And you can live, and this is what heart sourcing offers to guide you into. You can live in a way that you are grounded in unconditional love that is increasingly unwavering. At first we visit it and we fall back out of again. And that can happen for quite some time. But we come into the heart more and more. And we live out of that heart. And when we're grumpy, we're loving that. And there's never a moment where you throw out of your heart the person you're with or yourself. Because you're not crazy anymore like that. You're not crazy anymore to create suffering for yourself. You're not crazy anymore to think that you could possibly be missing something. Because when you really come into the here and now, into this moment, don't you have enough? Can't you deal with what is, even if you're ill, for instance, or in pain? At this moment, without the mental involvement that says, oh my God, this is terrible, I can't stand it, this is going to go on forever. All of that stuff is gone. And you're just present. And you bring your attention to the heart, to the most powerful of all medicines. So I invite you to try this way of life. in small bites at first, and then maybe a little bigger and bigger bites. And to find your way into the heart again and again. We're very conditioned to lose that focus, to get upset, to run after what we want, and to defend ourselves against what we don't want. And so we're constantly in some kind of war. And that war is just not something we can ever win. And it's not necessary at all. We have in us the source of peace. We have in us an unending fountain of love. And it's not a love of this versus that. It's a love that includes everything. It's a non-dual love, you may say. And you can be embedded in that love. Now, if you've ever felt love, and everyone has, then you already have a taste of what that is like. And I invite you to want that more and more. Stay tuned, as they say in the radio show. Don't touch that dial, but you're going to have to wait maybe for a week. We don't know exactly when the next satsang is going to be. But for now, just remain in your heart with all my love. Namaste.